Welcome again to a new episode of Nine Pandas, where we try to learn more about China. Today we're talking about a very interesting topic, and I also think a very important topic, which is how China changed over the last couple of years, or even over the last 100 years, and how it is managing the change. So today we're talking about China change. And I'm very honored to have two very relevant guests in that respect. This is Harvey Dzodin, and Yuling, Zhang Yuling, his spouse. So I would quickly like to introduce you, Harvey. So basically, Harvey is a senior fellow at the Beijing-based think tank Center for China and Globalization. Harvey, you are also a regular columnist and commentator on CGTN. This is the international TV channel of China, as well as China Radio International and many other media outlets as well. You are also a senior advisor of the Tsinghua University School of Journalism and Communication. And for those of you who don't know, Tsinghua, I think, is currently the world's, from an engineering point, the world's most innovative university. And also you have been a former advisor to the Carter administration in the United States. And you've also been a former vice president of ABC television. And last but not least, you're also a Juris Doctor of the Harvard Law School. So happy to have you here, Harvey. Very honored.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
And also, I'm very honored to have Zhang Yuling, Harvey's spouse. So Yuling, you are a vice manager of Lucky Earth Culture Company, which sounds very interesting. And perhaps in the future, we could also have a talk about culture in China. Would be really happy to have that. And you're also a reporter for the Hong Kong economic web news. Yes. So again, thank you for joining in today.
Thank you.
So let's start with a quick introduction about China change, just something that I've compiled quickly. Basically, I think change has been a very important topic in China since millennia, you could say that. One of the first very important books in China was called the Book of Changes, or I Ching. Yuling, you have to correct me if I didn't spell.
I Ching, yeah.
I Ching, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And today people more know it because of the yin-yang symbol, right?
Mm-hmm.
But basically this symbol came out of this original page here, where all the different stages of the change would be listed. So, and also I've once heard that around 100 years ago, people would say that China was basically the place where time stood still. So in Europe, then people liked that it looked so ancient and whatever and all of these things. But of course, change is sometimes really also needed. And yes, this is what we are now going to discuss. If you check the business district of Shanghai, which is called Pudong, you can see that only in 1990, there was basically not much there. I think there were even some rice fields and just some small industry. But then only 20 years later, you would have high rises there, and later on more high rises, and today even more high rises. So again, within a time span of roughly 30 years, like everything changed completely in China. And that is also something what makes me so interested about China. It's just something where you can always learn something. There's always something changing. It never gets boring. Yes. And the same thing also happened with other cities. For example, this is Shenzhen, which used to be a small fishing village nearby Hong Kong. In 1985, you could see there wasn't much there, but now it's a city with many million people, and it's actually, I would say, one of the most futuristic cities of China. So again, a huge change, really. And of course, then, as you can compare, like maybe 100 years ago, it looked like this in China, and now you have like electric cars everywhere, high-speed trains, electronic payment, all of these things. And in some ways, it has even already surpassed, I would say, Europe and other Western countries in terms of technology or modernity, or how you want to call it. So
one interesting point is that I went for the first time to China in 1988, and I remember looking over from Shanghai on the side of the Bund over to Pudong, and it was exactly like the picture and exactly like you described it. It was just farms and fields, and that has morphed into this amazing part of Shanghai now. In such a very short time, it's grown so much. So the change in Shanghai was profound.
Mm. And Yuling, what do you? I mean, you were born in China. You grew up there. Maybe you can say in which province was that?
Shandong.
Okay, Shandong. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in Shandong, Qingdao has been changed very, very much. Yeah, Qingdao, you know the Qingdao beer, that city.
Yes,
Yeah.
and of course, Shandong is also famous because a lot of very important philosophers came from there, like Confucius, Mao Zedong, and others. Yes, yeah.
Shandong people have very good name in China. They said the honest and the directory. It's good. I'm proud of Shandongese.
Great. Harvey, what were some of the most profound changes that you saw in China during the past 20, 30 years? Yeah.
Well, I think that China's economic development, moving from quite a poor country now to a solidly middle income country that's conquered most severe poverty. And this is a huge accomplishment, which parallels the accomplishment of not only lifting 850 million people out of poverty, but also doing about the same thing for literacy. So when you showed that old picture, most of the people at that time would have been illiterate and would have needed a scribe to write a letter, let's say. But now it's completely changed, and virtually all the population, even in the countryside, is literate. But what I remember is how gray and how undifferentiated China was in 1988. In the large cities like Shanghai and Beijing, there were millions of flying pigeons, which are not real pigeons, but the popular bicycle brand of the time. And actually, well, today, it's very dangerous to cross the street in China. But then it was very dangerous to cross the street too, because there were so many bicycles and it was never ending. And seems to me like it may have been even more dangerous then than it is now, because it just, it never stopped. People wore gray clothes or blue clothes. There was no fashion to speak of. Everyone kind of looked and dressed alike. And now China's had its own color revolution, but not a political revolution, but a fashion revolution. That China is in the forefront now of fashion design, and also you can find almost every kind of dress there. Like, for example, not only the most up-to-date, but also you can find the ancient styles as well, because they've had a renaissance. And so you see many people wearing traditional clothes. And I think this is part of the beauty of China, is its great variety and diversity. But when I first went to China, and I think when Yuling was growing up, there was not that diversity, right?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes, and Yuling, what do you think? What has changed most within your? I mean, since you were born in China,
Economy.
the economy.
Economy has been changed a lot. Yeah. Traffic. Yeah, traffic has been changed a lot.
Yeah, traffic's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there was also once a song called, I think there are, or in a song somebody was singing, there are 1 million bicycles in Beijing, right? And then like 20 years later, there are 1 million cars in Beijing, and maybe another 20 years later, there are 1 million flying cars in Beijing also. It's kind of, somebody once coined the word China speed. And yeah, it is just incredible, right, to see how fast everything changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there'll be that many flying cars, but I'm sure that there'll be that many autonomous vehicles, because China is a world leader in a lot of different kinds of high tech, but especially in autonomous vehicles and in electric cars. And I'm sure also that in the not too distant future, there will be other models as well, like hydrogen powered cars, which are just on the horizon, but not implemented yet. Electricity is good because it redistributes pollution to less polluted parts of the country. But hydrogen cars will be much better because they leave no pollution. They only leave water vapor. And so when that can be brought to scale in, let's say, who knows, 10 or so years, I think that's going to be a huge revolution in China and in the world. So I keep your eye on electricity, but I keep your mind on hydrogen and the profound changes that it's going to bring in the not too distant future.
Okay, wow, thank you. All right, so good, then basically let's go to the next question then. And this is kind of more, I think it's more directed to Yuling, and it's kind of about the ancient history of China. Before we briefly saw a picture of the Book of Changes, which incidentally this picture was made out of the book that was in possession of Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. He was just a German genius about 200 years ago. And yes, so basically the question is, thousands of years ago, there was already the Book of Changes in China. Do you think the Chinese elders in ancient times have already then recognized the importance of change and progress?
Yeah, so many times at that time has been many changes, but that they always failed. Because all the politics, I mean, that means the emperor, he's very poor. They think change is risky for them. That is, so many changes is get failed. Yeah.
Okay.
Also,
sorry for that. Yeah.
Also, I would say that the yin and yang. This is you mentioned this, Carly. And this is a very important concept that's wrapped up in this book of changes, right?
Yeah.
Because the Chinese people still believe very strongly in these polar opposites. And while in the West we see this yin and yang symbol, Chinese people really believe in this. And I'd also have to say that Chinese people pay a lot of attention to the past. They're a little superstitious, but also they come from a very old culture. And so this culture is almost genetically implanted in their genes. And so it's very interesting because they have an eye on the past, the present, and the future. And I think it's one of the outlooks that makes China great, because it has a firm foundation of 5,000 or more years of history. But they're not only thinking about that and the continuity from then until now, but also thinking about the future. China has these 5-year plans. Many people in the West criticize them for having 5-year plans. They just think it's some Stalinistic propaganda tool, but it isn't. It's really a way of planning for the future, because in order to meet the future, you have to plan for it and set goals. So the 5-year plan is an excellent way of getting from now until 5 years into the future. And next year, China has its next 5-year plan. And the previous one has seen profound changes, and the next one maybe even more, especially this year that China and the rest of the world has been through the coronavirus, that this is going to be partly about health as well as economic development.
So you would say that the Chinese people, they don't just look more into the past, but they also look more into the future than people in the West usually do.
They're racing in both directions, actually. And I think, if I'm correct, in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, their flag had a two-headed eagle. One was looking right and one was looking left. One was looking at the past and the other was looking at the future. And I think China is looking in the past, but it's not something that stops them. It's something that actually speeds them and inspires them to make great changes. Why? Because China has made a lot of discoveries and a lot of inventions for which for many years the West took credit for. But now it's being recognized more and more that China did many fabulous things in the past. It's not only just about fire and about gunpowder and about the written alphabet, but many things that they've created. And there's a whole series of books written by an English professor that has all these inventions, and it's multiple volumes, like an encyclopedia of all the things that China invented but wasn't temporarily allowed to take credit for. So I think one of the pride aspects of China these days is that China sees all the things that it's made and created before, and that this is what propels them in some ways into do the same thing in the future, but in terms of other things like high technology, quantum computing, space, and so on.
In evolution theory, it is widely recognized that those that can adapt best to change are those who are the fittest, and not those who are the strongest. Do you think the Chinese society is worldwide the most adaptable society, since there has been constant change in China? I would say, all the way since Mao Zedong took power. I mean, Chinese people, they don't know anything else but change, right? Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. It's changing like a kaleidoscope, changes colors. But I would say that every country is different, and there are many countries that are striving for change and that have gone through upheavals, and they solve problems differently. But you look at China, especially what we call New China, and New China since 1949 has gone through its ups and downs as well. So you have to say that they've made great strides in those 71 years, and that they'll continue to do it. And I think part of the reason is the resilience of the people, their strength, their faith in the past, the present, and the future. And also, well, we may disagree with the form of government in China, or we may have a preferable one, or we may have one in our country that's different. The Chinese model, in terms of the Communist Party, people do get a say in how they're governed. And one of the best things that I think allows China to sprint ahead of many other countries is that leaders are trained to be leaders, to lead in governments, and that they go through almost like a ladder. They climb a ladder from the most local village up to the very top position in the Chinese government. So anybody who gets a senior position in China has been through many different experiences. It's kind of like what they say about Harvard Business School. In Harvard Business School, you're supposed to learn everything that might happen to you or every problem that you might face. So it's not going to be new to you. You'll be exposed to it. You'll have some idea or have the idea about how to react to it. And I think this kind of training is absent in many countries. You only have to look at somebody like President Trump to see that he didn't have the training to be a leader in government. And there's maybe not a lot of Trumps, thank goodness, but there are not always a lot of trained people in other countries. But the Chinese system really does take the best and the brightest and identifies them, nurtures them, makes them compete. And I think it's like the cream rising to the top. It's exactly like that.
Mm. And they also have like a meritocratic, I mean, they have a committee of meritocrat. I mean, that looks that the right people get to the top, right? So it's basically, it's a fair game, let's say it like that, right? I mean, who is promoted and so on.
Yeah, I guess you could say it's basically a meritocracy. And I think not all countries can say that. And I think people in this system of China have really earned their, their position. Or if they haven't gone up that high, they get a wealth of experiences and are well suited for the positions or the level in which they're serving. I think that's very, very important. And I think it sets China apart from many other countries.
Yeah. It's actually, I mean, I'm an engineer, so it's actually a little bit like an engineer's approach, because if you have a very complicated machine, you also wouldn't let somebody handle it who doesn't have a lot of experience with it. So you first have to work with it, you first have to get experience, you have to learn it, and only then you can go to the more complicated things, right?
Yeah, it's like an airplane. I mean, you don't want a person with very little experience flying a 747 with hundreds of people on board. You want somebody who's had a lot of experience, who's been trained for every condition that might occur, and you can feel comfortable. And we've had some crashes in the last couple of years where the pilots in other countries have been woefully inadequately trained, or they were well trained but didn't have the experience. And so experience matters. And you can see this in China. So China is really like a 747 that's flying in a straight direction towards a goal because it's piloted by people who have rich experience.
Okay. Are there many are many changes in China state-induced rather than grown naturally or grown, let's say, from the grassroots or so? It's more from top down than from bottom up?
Well, I think that's a chicken and egg question because it's a little bit of both. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it because of the government and the party, or is it because of the individuals? And I'd have to say that it's both. I say it's both because Chinese people are very motivated and the Chinese Communist Party is very well organized. So I think Chinese people are a little bit like Jewish people, like me. Jewish people and Chinese people, we love a lot of the same things. We love money. We love education.
Food.
We love good food, and some of our food is the same. We love family. We love history. And we strive to do the best that we possibly can. And I think in China, both the system and the individuals determine the progress that China's made. Of course, you need both. Each side is necessary, but not sufficient. And I think that while there have been bumps in the roads in China, as there have been in many countries, that China today is really humming along. So recently, China made a great advance, like in quantum computing. Recently, China has had many technological achievements, such as bringing back rock samples from the moon, the first time in about half a century. And this takes good people and good government. And so China, it's a sweet spot that's hit both of those. So I think it's both, and you can't say it's one or the other, but you need both in order to make this tremendous achievement that China has made and is making.
And again, as an engineer, I would say that if you consider China to be a black box, which I think for most people, China is a black box because they know very little about China. But you see what was China 30 years ago and what is China today, then you have to say that this is a black box, but it seems to work, right? So
right. Well, I don't think it's a mystery, but I think that you're absolutely correct that a lot of people don't know about China. They get a lot of misinformation from various media. And the best way to see what China is when things get better, when there's no more COVID-19 or no COVID-20 or 21, to come to China and see. Chinese people are very friendly. Chinese food is very good. From the picture that you showed about the high-speed trains going 400 kilometers an hour, and soon, or in a few years, it'll be 600 plus kilometers an hour. It's also technologically advanced. So we get propaganda and misinformation and fake news from every corner, no matter what we're talking about. So the best thing is to see with your own eyes. So it's worth going to China. And maybe if you go and you're young and go in the next few years, you'll go back again. And I'm sure the changes from then to the next time are very profound. So don't just take the word of the media for it, go and see for yourself and make your own decisions. You'll see a lot of different things, and you can make up your own mind, especially if you have the opportunity to visit with people and not just to go see tourist sites. I think you'll be astounded by China, because I think many people still have the image of China that you showed in that old picture with the beautiful gate. But China has that, but they're just reproductions now. But what China has now is that same spirit of achievement and innovation that it had at that time. And actually, I think if I can give you a commercial, that you're one of the people who's building bridges between the West and the East. And so you have this organization that connects Switzerland to China, and it shows great foresight. And in the West, we think of Switzerland as being this kind of fairy tale country with beautiful mountains and skiing and anchors and chocolate and raclette and stuff like that. But what most people don't know, and I was quite shocked when I learned it, is that for many years now, for about a decade, Switzerland has been judged the most creative country in the world. But China isn't far behind now either. You're trying to connect like to like. And I'm sure that China and Switzerland are superior in different respects. So the answer is to put them together so that 1 + 1 = 1,000 or whatever. And I think that's what you're doing. And so ever since Yuling and I have met you, we've always admired your work and your efforts and those of your colleagues. And I'm sure that they're going to bear great fruit.
Today, the world has countless challenges like climate change and others. It seems apparent that the world would need to progress faster to be able to master these challenges. Thus, the West, and indeed the rest of the world, has to learn from China how to change and progress faster.
Again, I think that the best combination is if you can be more inclusive and include as many different kinds of societies with different outlooks, different philosophies, different histories as possible. So like President Xi says, you want to build a community of shared future for mankind. And so I think that we all are partners, or should be partners, in that effort. Chinese can teach people from other countries about how to do certain things, but Americans or Swiss or Austrians can teach others how to do something. So where somebody has an advantage, someone else might have a deficiency. So if you put a bunch of people together, that's the best idea. And I think that this is one of the most positive aspects of globalization. This year, with the virus and with people fighting over equipment and things like that, it hasn't been a stellar year for cooperation. But my think tank, Center for China and Globalization, did a study that showed how between the US and China, during each's worst phase of the coronavirus, especially NGOs, nonprofit organizations, really pitched in to help the other side. So what's true for philanthropy is also true for scientific development. So we come at the world in different ways from different perspectives. And if we have the opportunity to work together, we can teach each other things that we ourselves individually might not get to see. So I think that's the formula, and I think that you're one of the cooks who's baking this formula, this recipe. So I think just don't do it, do more of it.
Do you think there are instances where change in China went too fast?
Yeah, that is a difficult question. I think some experiments that were tried in early new China might have gone too far. But I think recently, I don't think you could say that quite as much. I think the most you could say, or the most damning indictment could be that China tries so hard, and sometimes there's failure and sometimes there's successes. But I think lately the successes have far outweighed the failures. And so if you look at the growth of electric vehicles, if you look at the trains, for example, the difference between, let's say, America and China on trains is night and day. Our trains, even the fastest train, the Acela Express, creeps along while the Chinese trains go so fast. It's true that in the early days of the high-speed train that there was one accident where some people got killed, but you learn from your mistakes. And train travel is much safer than driving a car or even than being on a bicycle. So sometimes you have to take calculated risks. And China also now, speaking about COVID, yeah, maybe China made some mistakes at the beginning of the experience, but they learned from those mistakes and very quickly. So you have the situation where China has virtually no cases. It has a few now, but virtually no cases. And places in the United States, like the United States, are having more than 3,000 deaths a day, more than were killed in the World Trade Center. And now the death toll in America has exceeded the total of all the American combat soldiers in World War II. This is astounding. And we do a new 9/11 every day. But China early on had this problem and mastered it. And by the way, from what I've read, I don't necessarily believe myself that the virus began in Wuhan, because there's evidence that it was present in waste systems and present in other evidence, like a situation with a 4-year-old boy in Italy who had COVID, but it wasn't discovered in November before it was ever in Wuhan. And it was only discovered by a retrospective look by Italian scientists. So I believe that China is moving ahead very quickly. And so China has a number of vaccines. They'll be hitting the market in the next couple of weeks and months. And I think those are going to make a great contribution, because with 1.4 billion people to serve, in addition to China's pledge, unlike America, to make vaccines a global public good, China is going to do its fair share. So maybe China is pushing hard. I admit it, but I think that pushing hard, that they've borne great fruit and made many achievements.
Great. And I also have to say that, for example, I mean, yes, you mentioned that in the past few years, there were not so many problems with, I mean, introducing changes or so, right? I mean, like WeChat Pay or so. I mean, those electronic payment systems, I've hardly heard of any problems when they introduced it and so on. And it's kind of, they have also there the kind of engineering approach. So they first do like a test or a prototype, maybe in a small area of China, and if it works, then they can roll out it to the country, right?
Right, correct.
Good. So then the next question is maybe one for Yuling. So yes. Do you think the attitude of the people has a big impact on how fast a society can progress? For example, the words "it can't be done," I've seldomly heard in China. So what do you think? You think if people always think we can do it, do you think that's good for, I mean, the progress of society?
For Chinese, I don't know how can.
Well, I think it's what you said before, that in China, it's a top-down society.
Yeah,
So
have to be the supporter of the top power. Otherwise, it's difficult. In China, the culture is different, and the people what you want is just you want, but how to go on have to get the support for the top power. I mean.
The next question is if technological adaptation within the society in China continues to progress at the current rate and technological adaptation in the West is not picking up soon, for example, 5G and other things. So there will be some kind of rift between the West and the East, where the East has just progressed further. And to what could that lead?
Well, I think in time, the West will wake up and put more money into STEM education and things like that are necessary to have the scientific and technical skills. Until that happens, China is going to outperform significantly the West. As President Biden's Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, says, the US and China are in competition, but he'd like to see it be a race to the top and not the bottom. So I think that's what it should be. And in America, unfortunately, we're very deficient. So you have children, school children in China in primary school learning how to code. And this is almost unheard of in most other places. And so this is why, China is doing so well. I also have to say that there's a difference between technology and some other fields. So China is not number one in everything. They're certainly doing very well in technology and development and economic progress and intellectual progress. But some institutions take longer than others to build. And I have to say that things like the court system, the legal system, are works in progress. And they're going to take more work in the future. But I'm convinced that they will be progressing as well. So I don't want people to think that everything is progressing at the same speed. Some things are progressing faster than others.
But I think it's a good time for Europe in the work with China now.
Of course.
Probably China is worried about America.
Well,
after Trump did this.
Well, I think that Europe, China, and America, these are going to be like the three main power centers in a way. And maybe it's going to be very good or very bad, because you either have to get all three together, or you need a critical mass of two, maybe against another. And we hope that it can be three together, contributing their resources and knowledge for the betterment of all. But it remains to be seen. But I do believe, as an American, that the way President Trump did things was the wrong way. And I think that President Biden has an opportunity, because he has a more balanced approach, is a more empathetic person, and knows China well, unlike Trump, who's hated China for years and years. I believe there's a chance for cooperation, especially in areas where our national interests overlap. What are they these days? Well, pandemic prevention, health promotion, that's certainly one, and the environment. President Xi and President Obama work together under a model of a new model of great power relations to assure the passage of the Paris Climate Agreement, which Trump pulled out of and which Biden has pledged to go back into on day one of his administration. There can be more of those kinds of cooperations, I'm sure.
Mm. So kind of like in an Olympic competition, right? So we compete, but we are friends, right? We care for each other.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Mm.
Good way to put it.
Yeah.
So then the last question would be, do you think China can keep up with the current rate of change and may even be a vastly different country in 2050? So if you visit China today, you will not recognize China in 2050 because it's already way ahead.
Yeah, keep to change.
It'll keep changing.
Keep change.
Nobody can predict the future. Well, actually they did predict the virus, but nobody did anything about it. But nobody can really predict the future. And so it's impossible to say. But I think that even though the Chinese economy has slowed down just because it's grown so much that it's harder to grow as a more advanced economy, that it has the great potential, especially with its 5-year planning, of continuing the growth, of continuing the amazing things that it's done. And we shouldn't forget about the Belt and Road Initiative. So the Belt and Road Initiative is President Xi's effort to bring back a version of the old Silk Road and the old maritime Silk Road, and to have a symbiotic relationship with many countries in the world, not just the traditional Silk Road countries, but going as far as the southern tip of Latin America and going many different places. I think that's an important initiative that's going to bring countries together rather than bring them apart. And so I believe that China has a fantastic future, but it's also had a very storied history and a very prosperous present. I think that's a recipe for the future growth, and a positive recipe not only for China, but all the countries in the world.
Very well said, yes. Yes, and with that, I would like to thank you to join this conversation today. I learned a lot. Thank you very much from both of you. And I wish you a healthy and nice end of the year, nice holidays. And yes, let's hope that 2021 will be a much improved year compared to this year, right?
Yeah, let's hope. It's hard to imagine it any worse, but we'll persevere and look forward to 2021. Thanks very much for taking the time to speak with Yuling and I, and we're looking forward to see you in person one of these days.
Thank you. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. And yes, stay safe. And again, have a nice couple of holidays. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Carly. Bye.
Bye, Harvey. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.